Your services are no longer required, Jessica announced, her voice carrying coldly across the mahogany table in our family's boardroom. Clear your office by tomorrow. I observed the faces around me, board members with raised eyebrows, executives shifting uncomfortably in their leather chairs, and my sister with that self-satisfied smile I knew all too well. She had waited years for this moment. I looked at our father, Daniel, but he wouldn't meet my gaze. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just nodded, gathered my pens, and walked out with a secret smile. Tomorrow morning would be very fun. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. The heavy mahogany door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time in 15 years, I didn't feel the weight of Legacy Heights developments on my shoulders. I felt light. I felt focused. I didn't head to my office to clear my desk or gather my things. There was nothing in that room I needed. All my real assets were already safe. I walked straight to the parking garage, my heels echoing against the concrete with a rhythmic, clinical precision. I didn't cry. I didn't call a friend to vent. I simply pulled out my phone and sent a 3-word text to Destiny, my most trusted associate, Phase 1. Now. By the time I reached my car, my internal temperature had dropped to a comfortable, icy clarity. For over a decade, I had been the silent investor in my family's version of success. I am Alyssa, and for over a decade, I have been the silent architect who designed the foundations of my family's success. I had been the architect who designed the foundations while my sister, Jessica, and my father, Daniel, stood on the balcony taking all the credit. They treated my loyalty like a subscription service they could cancel at any time, but they forgot to read the fine print. I drove to a small, nondescript office space in Midtown Atlanta that no one in my family knew existed. This was the headquarters of VC Strategy Group, an entity I had quietly built 5 years ago as an insurance policy against this exact moment. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and watched the screen glow with the cold light of a different kind of sunrise. I opened the master client file. 14 names. 14 relationships I had cultivated with sweat, late nights, and a level of technical expertise Jessica couldn't even spell. Skyline Urban. The Atlanta Portfolio. The Savannah Waterfront Project. Together, these accounts represented $85 million in annual revenue. That was 80% of Legacy Heights' lifeblood. My father and sister thought they owned these clients. They thought the Legacy Heights brand was what kept the checks coming. But I knew the truth. Clients don't buy brands, they buy trust. And they trusted me. I began drafting the emails. I didn't use emotional language or mention the boardroom betrayal. This was a business transaction. Each email was a mirror image of the last. Pursuant to the Master Service Agreement, VC Strategy Group is exercising its right to terminate its fulfillment contract with Legacy Heights Developments, effective immediately. All future project management and architectural oversight for your account will be handled directly through our primary offices. I hit send. Then I hit send again. 14 times. By 12:03 a.m., I had effectively cut the financial throat of my family's empire. While Jessica was likely at an upscale restaurant, drinking $100 bottles of wine to celebrate her new title, I was closing the books on her future. She wanted the title of CEO. I wanted the assets. I leaned back and watched my inbox begin to ping with immediate responses from my clients, confusion, support, and a unanimous refusal to work with anyone but me. I didn't feel revenge. I felt like an accountant correcting a long-standing error. My compassion had been a luxury my family had overdrafted for years. Tonight, I was simply balancing the ledger. I sat in the dim glow of my laptop, the silence of the Midtown office wrapping around me like a cold shroud. For 15 years, I had occupied a space in that family that was never quite a home. It was more like a storage unit for their expectations. I rubbed my eyes, not out of exhaustion, but to clear the phantom images of the past. I'd been the silent investor in the Connors legacy, paying dividends of my own self-worth to keep their illusion of a perfect family afloat. I remembered the night I finalized the $85 million urban development plan for Atlanta. I hadn't slept for 72 hours. When I walked into my father's office, Daniel barely glanced at the blueprints that represented the future of our company. He was too busy admiring a photo of Jessica in her sorority formal gown. "That's nice, Alyssa," he had said without looking up. "But look at your sister. Doesn't she look like a winner?" It was a pattern so consistent it became the air I breathed. Jessica was the showpiece, the polished marble facade of Legacy Heights. I was the reinforced steel buried deep in the mud, necessary for the structure to stand, but intentionally kept out of sight. My mother used to ask why I couldn't be more like her, more charming, more easy to love. What she meant was that I was too real, too focused on the technical truth of the business while they were all addicted to the performance of success. I realize now that I was caught in the trap of normalized cruelty. It is a psychological mechanism where a family begins to treat emotional neglect and systemic exclusion as standard operating procedure. They didn't think they were being mean, they simply categorized me as a utility rather than a daughter. My father chose Jessica because she was easier to control, a beautiful vessel for his own ego, while my competence made him feel obsolete. Growing up, I was the spare, the one they kept around to do the heavy lifting while the golden child received the accolades. I remember being 12 years old and winning the state math competition. My parents never showed up to the ceremony because Jessica had a dance recital that same afternoon. They told me to be sensible about it. That word became a cage. Be sensible about your lack of a seat at the table. Be sensible about being fired from the company you built. The cracked photo frame on my new desk held a picture of the three of us from 5 years ago. Daniel's arm was draped around Jessica's shoulders. I was standing half a step back, partially out of focus. I stared at that image for a long time before dropping it into the trash can. I was done being a placeholder. This wasn't a breakdown, it was a long overdue audit of my life. And the audit showed that my family was morally bankrupt. At exactly 8:30 the next morning, my phone began its frantic dance on the desk. I didn't reach for it. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. I wanted Jessica to feel every second of that silence. I wanted her to feel the air being sucked out of her brand new CEO office. When I finally answered, I didn't say hello. "Alyssa, what on earth have you done?" her voice shrieked, barely recognizable through the distortion of pure panic. "Skyline Urban just called. Bate Winters told me she doesn't know who I am. She said our contract is with something called VC Strategy Group." "Explain this now." I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. "It is quite simple, Jessica. The contract headers have listed my consulting LLC as the primary service provider for the last 5 years. You were just the fulfillment partner. Since Legacy Heights decided my services were no longer required, I took those services elsewhere. Along with my clients. You're sabotaging the family," she screamed. I could practically see her face turning that specific shade of blotchy red she gets when she loses control. "Dad is losing his mind. He's calling the lawyers. We will sue you for everything you have. You're a thief, Alyssa. A manipulative, selfish monster." I didn't flinch. Her anger felt like static noise, annoying, but meaningless. "Sabotage is a strong word for a standard business transition," I said, my voice clinical. "I didn't steal anything. I moved my assets to a safer environment. If the company is collapsing, it is because you built your castle on sand." This is the trap Jessica fell into, the illusion of power from an empty wallet. This psychological trap occurs when an individual believes that holding a title or a position of authority automatically grants them actual power, ignoring the fact that they lack the underlying value to sustain it. Jessica believed the CEO chair made her a leader, but it was just a shell. She had the title, the office, and the mahogany table, but she had none of the relationships or the technical brilliance required to keep the revenue flowing. When I left, I didn't just leave a job, I removed the value from the vault, leaving her holding an expensive, empty wallet. My phone pinged with a text from our father. "You've destroyed my legacy. I never want to see you again." I deleted it without a second thought. Daniel had spent years normalizing my exclusion, and now he was shocked that I had made it permanent. Destiny walked into my office then, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a stack of new employee contracts. Behind her, 3 of our former senior architects were already setting up their workstations. They hadn't even hesitated when I called. They knew where the real work happened. Skyline Urban just wired the first installment for the new project phase, Destiny said, a sharp smile on her face. $150,000. They want a meeting tomorrow to discuss the expansion. Good, I replied. Send Jessica a courtesy email. Tell her the client files are in the shared drive, exactly where they've always been. Of course, without the passwords to my proprietary design software, they'll just be pretty pictures she can't use. But I'm sure she'll find a way to make it look elegant. I looked at my team. The energy in the room was focused and professional. Legacy Heights was currently a hive of panic and debt, a corporate corpse waiting for the lawyers to arrive. Here, in this quiet office, we were actually building. This wasn't revenge, it was a long overdue rebalancing of the books. The office was quiet until Grace Levinson entered, her footsteps sharp against the hardwood. She didn't offer a greeting. She simply laid a manila folder on my desk and sat down. Her expression was the same one she used right before she dismantled a witness in court, calm, focused, and utterly lethal. I did a deep dive into the historical accounts for Legacy Heights, she began, her voice low. Specifically, the transition funds after your mother passed away. I found a discrepancy. A $1,500,000 discrepancy. I pulled the documents toward me. My heart didn't race, it slowed down, entering that familiar state of analytical chill. I looked at the payout authorization from my mother's life insurance policy. This was the money she had specifically set aside for me, a safety net she'd built because she knew, even then, that I was the only one who wouldn't be taken care of by the Connors name. At the bottom of the page was my signature. Except it wasn't. The loop on the first letter was too wide. The pressure on the ink was wrong. I stared at the ink as if it were a physical wound. He forged it, I whispered. It wasn't a question. Daniel forged your name 4 years ago, Grace confirmed, tapping a second document. And here is the paper trail for where that money went. It didn't go into a company investment. It was wired through a series of shell accounts to clear a private debt in Las Vegas. Jessica's private debt. I leaned back, the leather of my chair creaking in the silence. $1,500,000. My mother's final act of love, siphoned off to pay for Jessica's gambling addiction. Daniel hadn't just been a father who favored one child over the other. He was a criminal who had committed identity theft and embezzlement against his own daughter to protect his favorite's wreckage. I looked at the signature again. It was a fraudulent contract. I'd spent 15 years trying to fulfill an agreement of loyalty that my father had broken before the ink was even dry. He had called me a worthless burden while he was literally living off the capital he'd stolen from me. This changes the math, I said, my voice sounding like ice scraping on glass. This isn't a business dispute anymore. This is a felony. I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon a single ounce of regret, but there was only clarity. My compassion had been a luxury they'd overdraft for decades, and now the account was closed. My father had spent my legacy to buy Jessica another chance to fail. He had bet my future on a loser, and now it was time for the house to collect. Does Daniel know we have this? I asked. Not yet, Grace replied. He's still busy trying to convince the board that you're the unstable one. I looked out the window at the city I had helped design. The buildings looked like a balance sheet against the sky. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is an emotion for people who still care about the outcome of a relationship. I was in a different place now. I was in the final stage of an audit. Draft the formal notice, I told her. But don't send it to the lawyers yet. I want to deliver this one in person. I want to see the exact moment Daniel realizes that his golden child didn't just cost him his company, she cost him his freedom. Inside, my laptop glowed with a different kind of sunrise, the kind made of facts, numbers, and quiet retribution. This wasn't revenge. It was a final, corrective entry in a ledger that had been imbalanced for far too long. The lobby of VC Strategy Group smelled like fresh paint and the clinical scent of victory. I was sitting at my glass-topped desk when the elevator doors chimed. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. The heavy, uneven footsteps of a man who had lost his stride and the frantic, clicking heels of a woman who had run out of time. Daniel and Jessica walked into my office, and for a moment, I almost didn't recognize them. My father looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 weeks. His suit, once crisp and authoritative, hung loosely on his frame. Jessica was worse. Her immaculate facade had crumbled, her hair was unkempt, and her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. They didn't look like the rulers of an architectural empire. They looked like survivors of a shipwreck they had caused themselves. "Alyssa," Daniel began, his voice cracking on my name. He reached out as if to touch my desk but pulled back. "We need to talk. As a family." "Family is a term we stopped using in that boardroom, Daniel," I said, my voice flat and clinical. "I didn't offer them a seat. You're here because the banks are calling in the loans. You're here because Skyline Urban and the other 13 accounts are gone. You're here because Legacy Heights has a negative valuation for the first time in its history." Jessica stepped forward, her voice high and desperate. "We're losing everything, Alyssa. The house, the reputation, the legacy. You have to come back. Dad will make you CEO. I'll step down. I'll be your assistant if that's what it takes. Just fix it. Please, just make the clients come back." I looked at my sister, the golden child who had been gifted my hard work like a party favor. Her desperation was a currency I had no interest in spending. "I'm not a plumber, Jessica. I don't come in to fix leaks in a foundation you intentionally cracked." Daniel leaned against the wall, his shoulders slumped. "I made a mistake. I see that now. You were always the one with the vision. Legacy Heights needs you. I'm begging you, daughter. For your mother's sake." That was the trigger. I felt the icy clarity in my chest solidify into a weapon. "Don't you dare mention her name," I said, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. I opened the manila folder Grace had given me and slid a single document across the mahogany table, not the one in their boardroom, but the one I had paid for myself. "This is a criminal complaint for identity theft and the misappropriation of $1,500,000, I stated, watching the blood drain from Daniel's face as he saw the forged signature on the life insurance payout. "I know about the Las Vegas debts. I know about the shell accounts. And I know you stole my mother's final gift to me to fund Jessica's addiction." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Jessica gasped, her eyes darting to our father in shock. She hadn't known the source of the money, only that it had appeared when she needed it most. Daniel stared at the paper, his hands trembling. "You'd put your own father in prison," he whispered. "You put your own daughter in a cage of debt and invisibility for 15 years, I countered. "This isn't revenge. This is a final audit. And the numbers don't lie." I pulled out a second document, a standard purchase agreement. "Here is my offer. I will not come back to work for you. I will not save your reputation. I am going to buy Legacy Heights Developments. The entire company. The brand, the office, the debts, and the assets." Jessica leaned over to look at the price. $1, she shrieked. "You want to buy an 80-year-old company for $1? It's more than it's worth, considering the felony charges I'm currently holding," I said, leaning back and crossing my arms. "You sign the company over to me today, and you both sign a non-compete and a permanent gag order. In exchange, I don't file this complaint. You walk away with your freedom, but you walk away with nothing else. No pension. No title. No seat at the table." I checked my watch. "You have 60 seconds to decide. After that, I call the district attorney." Daniel looked at the criminal complaint, then at the $1 contract. He looked at Jessica, the child he had destroyed by never saying no, and then he looked at me, the child he had created by never saying yes. He picked up the pen with a shaky hand. The power flip was complete. The architect was finally taking control of the building. The day the sign came down was quieter than I expected. Legacy Heights Developments was stripped from the glass, leaving only a ghost of an outline where 80 years of family history used to hang. I stood on the sidewalk of Peachtree Street, watching the workers install the new brushed steel letters, A Design Empire. It was a different kind of landmark. It didn't represent a bloodline or a seat at a table I wasn't allowed to sit at. It represented the work. The transition was surgical. I officially took possession of the company for exactly $1, a sum so small it felt like a final audit of Daniel's pride. My father and sister are still in Atlanta, but they exist in a city I no longer recognize through their eyes. They moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts, far from the country clubs and the polished ballrooms where they once performed their versions of success. The elite circles they fought so hard to remain in have turned their backs. In a city built on reputation, they are now a cautionary tale of greed and incompetence. I hear that Jessica still spends her days scrolling through social media, looking for a version of herself that no longer exists. Daniel is reportedly a man of silence now, living out his remaining years in a poverty of his own making. I've stuck to the terms of our agreement. I haven't filed the criminal complaint, but I also haven't answered a single one of their calls. I realized that the greatest distance isn't measured in miles, it's measured in the total absence of emotional depth. But this victory isn't about their downfall. It is about what I am building in the space they left behind. I have officially established the A Design Foundation for Hidden Talents. We dedicate 10% of all our profits to providing legal aid, studio space, and scholarships to young designers and architects who have been marginalized by their own families or excluded from their rightful legacies. This is what I call the justice of the sower. While justice of punishment focuses on the pain of the past, the sower focuses on building a different future. My revenge wasn't the $1 contract or the boardroom humiliation. My revenge is the empire I've built on clean ground, where talent is the only currency and no one is ever made to feel invisible. Tonight, I am standing on the rooftop garden of our new headquarters. The sun is dipping below the Atlanta horizon, painting the skyscrapers in shades of gold and violet. For 15 years, I watched this view through a basement window of someone else's ambition. Now, the air is clear. I don't feel anger. I don't feel spite. I just feel the quiet, profound hum of a life that is finally, irrevocably mine. Alyssa's journey proves that the best way to win is to become so successful and so at peace that your enemies no longer have a role in your story. If you found Alyssa's strength inspiring, please like and share this video to support our community. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another story of ultimate justice. What would you do if you were in Alyssa's shoes? Let me know in the comments below.